What if the person who saves your billion-dollar empire is someone you've walked past for years without even noticing? This is the story of a tech genius who watched 12 years of brilliance collapse in minutes, and the cleaning lady who stopped the bleeding with 3 lines of code. A woman the military erased. A man too arrogant to see beyond his screens. And one impossible night that rewrote everything they thought they knew about power. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll never look at genius the same way again. You'll understand why the most valuable person in the room might be holding a mop instead of a MacBook. And you might just realize that brilliance isn't always found where the world tells us to look. This is a story about hidden warriors, shattered pride, and the kind of wisdom that restores what code cannot fix. Let me take you back to that night in San Francisco when an empire died and a miracle walked through the door. Welcome, my beautiful families. While you're here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts on the story and where you're watching from. You know, sometimes life has a way of stripping us down to nothing when we think we're invincible. Let me tell you about David Mark, the kind of man who believed he could code his way out of any problem. David was Silicon Valley royalty, self-made billionaire, founder and CEO of MarkTech Global, a company whose AI systems powered cities, hospitals, and governments across half the planet. For 12 years, he'd sacrificed everything for his vision. Relationships, sleep, sanity, all of it fed into the machine he'd built. His glass office sat on the 62nd floor overlooking San Francisco Bay. Windows so vast you could see the Golden Gate Bridge glowing in the distance like a promise of endless possibility. But on this particular night, all that glass felt like a cage. It started at 11:47 p.m. David was alone, reviewing final preparations for tomorrow's announcement. Quantum Link, the revolutionary AI network that would make MarkTech the most powerful tech company on Earth. Billions in investment capital were riding on this launch. The world was watching. Everything he'd dreamed of was finally within reach. Then, his primary monitor flickered. Just once. A red alert flashed in the corner. Data integrity warning. Then another and another. Within seconds, every screen in his office erupted with warnings. Error cascades, system failures, data corruption spreading like wildfire through MarkTech's entire global network. David's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying desperately to understand what was happening. But it was like watching a skyscraper implode, floor by floor. His company's entire infrastructure was collapsing. Customer databases, financial records, proprietary algorithms worth billions. Everything that made MarkTech valuable was vanishing into digital oblivion right before his eyes. Someone had attacked them. A cyber attack so sophisticated, so perfectly timed, that even his elite security team couldn't detect it until it was too late. David grabbed his phone with shaking hands and called his chief technology officer. No answer. He tried his head of cybersecurity. Voicemail. Everyone had gone home hours ago, celebrating tomorrow's big launch, completely unaware that their company was bleeding out on the 62nd floor. He slammed his palm against the desk, his breath coming in ragged gasps. No, 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 no. This cannot be happening. Not now. Not when I'm this close. Outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, San Francisco glittered with life. Cars flowing across the Bay Bridge, lights twinkling in apartments where people were cooking dinner, watching TV, living ordinary lives. They had no idea that up here, in this glass tower, a man's entire world was disintegrating. The city doesn't stop for you, David thought bitterly. It just keeps moving, whether you're winning or drowning. The isolation was suffocating, the silence unbearable. Just him and the relentless blinking of red warning screens showing him everything he was about to lose. 12 years. 12 years of genius, sacrifice, and ruthless ambition, erased in minutes. That's when he heard something. Footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps echoing down the empty hallway, followed by the soft squeak of wheels rolling across polished marble. David's head snapped up, confused. Who could possibly be here at this hour? A figure appeared in his doorway. She wore a brown maintenance uniform with white trim, her hair pulled back neatly beneath a simple headband. She pushed a cleaning cart, her movements calm and unhurried. She looked to be in her 30s, with intelligent eyes that widened slightly when she saw him sitting there in the dark, surrounded by screens flashing red like a dying heartbeat. "Oh," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't realize anyone was still here. I can come back later." David let out a bitter, hollow laugh. The absurdity of it all. His empire burning down while the cleaning lady apologized for interrupting. "Don't worry about it," he muttered, turning back to his screens in defeat. But she didn't leave. She stood there for a moment, her eyes scanning the chaos displayed across his monitors, and then, in a voice so calm it cut through his panic like a blade, "Sir, that's a distributed denial of service attack layered with a data exfiltration protocol. You've got maybe 90 seconds before your backup systems are compromised too." David froze. He turned slowly to look at her, his mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. "What did you just say?" She met his eyes with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between compassion and quiet certainty. "If you give me access to your root directory right now, I think I can stop it." What David didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known as he stared at this woman in a janitor's uniform, was that he was looking at a ghost. Not metaphorically, literally. Mary Evans had once been one of the most brilliant cyber defense analysts in U.S. military intelligence. For years, she'd defended classified networks from nation-state hackers, preventing catastrophes the public would never hear about. Until the day she was framed for a breach she didn't cause, stripped of her clearance, and erased from the system she'd spent her life protecting. Since then, she'd been invisible. A ghost pushing a cleaning cart through the same towers she used to secure. But on this night, in David Mark's glass office high above San Francisco, Mary Evans was about to become visible again. And what happened next would change everything. David stared at her, his mind racing through impossibilities. A cleaning lady, talking about root directories and attack protocols like she'd written the manual herself. He started, but Mary was already moving. She crossed the office with quiet confidence, setting her cart aside. Without waiting for permission, she pulled up a chair beside him and reached for the keyboard. Her fingers hovered over the keys for just a heartbeat, then descended like a pianist beginning a concerto. What happened next defied everything David thought he understood about his own system. Her hands moved with surgical precision, typing commands so fast they blurred across the screen. She navigated through MarkTech's architecture like she'd built it herself, bypassing security protocols, drilling through layers of encrypted directories, hunting for something David couldn't even see yet. "There," she murmured, pointing to a string of code scrolling past. "That's your entry point. Someone planted a back door 3 months ago using an executive access key. They've been waiting for the perfect moment." David's breath caught. "That's impossible. That would require top-level clearance," Mary finished, her eyes never leaving the screen. I know. She isolated the malware with a sequence of commands David had never seen before. Military-grade countermeasures that shouldn't exist outside classified networks. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, rerouting corrupted data streams, quarantining infected sectors, manually rebuilding firewall parameters in real time. 58 seconds. That's how long it took Mary Evans to stop a cyber attack that had crippled a billion-dollar company. The cascade of red warnings slowed, then stopped. One by one, MarkTech's core systems flickered back online. Damaged, but alive. The digital hemorrhaging had been stopped. Mary leaned back, exhaling slowly. She looked tired, sad almost. David couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. He just stared at the screens, then at her, then back at the screens. "Who are you?" he finally whispered. Mary stood, smoothing her uniform. "Just someone who's seen worse, Mr. Mark." Her voice was gentle, almost apologetic. "You'll want to call your security team now and change every executive access code you have. Whoever did this is still inside your company." She turned to leave. "Wait!" David rose from his chair, his legs unsteady. "You can't just... How did you..." He gestured helplessly at the monitors. "Those commands. Those weren't civilian protocols." Mary paused in the doorway, her back to him. For a long moment, she said nothing. "Good night, Mr. Mark. I'm glad I could help." Then she was gone, the soft squeak of her cleaning cart fading down the hallway. David stood alone in his office, his mind spinning. He pulled up the surveillance logs immediately, reviewing every keystroke she'd entered. The commands were breathtaking in their sophistication. Classified-level cyber warfare techniques. Maneuvers his own security chief wouldn't recognize. Things that required clearance levels most civilians didn't know existed. He ran a background check. Mary Evans, age 38, 5 years employed as night maintenance staff. Before that, nothing. Just a gap where a life should have been. Ghost protocols, witness protection, military intelligence. The pieces screamed at him, but none of them made sense. Why would someone with those skills be cleaning his floors? By dawn, David had made his decision. He found her 2 nights later, on the 47th floor, emptying trash bins with the same quiet efficiency she'd shown saving his empire. "I need your help," he said without preamble. "Whoever attacked us is still out there, still inside MarkTech. And I think they're planning to finish what they started." Mary didn't look up from her work. "You have a security team for that, Mr. Mark." "My security team couldn't stop what you stopped in 60 seconds. She finally met his eyes. There was something haunted there, something that had seen too much and lost even more. "Please," David said quietly, "not for me, but because you know what I know now. This wasn't random. This was deliberate, personal. And if we don't find out who did it, and why..." He paused. "People could get hurt." Mary studied him for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "One condition," she said. "When this is over, you forget you ever knew my name." David extended his hand. "Deal." She shook it, her grip surprisingly strong. Neither of them knew it yet, but in that handshake, an alliance had been forged that would uncover a betrayal neither could imagine, and change both their lives forever. They worked in David's private server room, a windowless vault 3 floors below his office. Mary had insisted on it. No network connections, no digital footprints, just air-gapped machines and raw data forensics. For 3 nights, She dissected the attack like a surgeon examining a body. "It wasn't random," Mary said on the fourth night, her eyes fixed on cascading lines of code. "Look at the timing. The attack triggered at 11:47 p.m., exactly 13 minutes before your automated backup sequence. Someone knew your system architecture intimately." David leaned closer, his tie loosened, exhaustion carved into his face. Could it have been an external hack? No. Mary pulled up a trace log, highlighting a sequence in red. The back door was activated manually, from inside your building, using a senior executive access code. The words hung in the air like an accusation. David's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. My executive team, these are people I've worked with for years, people I trust." "One of them doesn't trust you back," Mary said quietly. Over the next 2 days, Mary deployed forensic tracking scripts that mapped every executive access point for the past 6 months. She set ghost traps, invisible markers that would trigger if anyone accessed certain encrypted directories. She worked with the precision of someone who'd hunted traitors before. David watched her, fascinated and disturbed in equal measure. But more than that, something was breaking inside him. On the 6th night, he finally cracked. "You want to know the truth?" David said suddenly, his voice raw. "I'm terrified. Every single day. Everyone sees the billionaire genius, the man who built MarkTech from nothing. But they don't see the nights I can't sleep. The fear that it could all disappear, that I'm one mistake away from being nothing again." Mary paused her work, turning to face him. "I've spent 12 years being who everyone expects me to be," David continued, running his hands through his hair. "The next Steve Jobs. The visionary. The guy who never fails. But the truth is, I'm so damn lonely. I can't remember the last real conversation I had. Everyone wants something from me. Everyone except—" He stopped, looking at her. "Everyone except the woman who saved me and asked for nothing in return." Mary's expression softened. "You built an empire on code, David, and that's impressive. But maybe what it needs now isn't more algorithms. Maybe it needs a conscience." Before David could respond, Mary's laptop chimed. Her ghost trap had been triggered. She spun back to her screen, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Someone just accessed the Quantum Link source files. Executive credentials. "They're trying to copy." She froze, her face going pale. "What?" David demanded. "What is it?" Mary pulled up a financial tracking interface, something she'd built to monitor unusual transactions tied to MarkTech's accounts. A single transfer glowed on the screen like a smoking gun. $30,000, $. Source, NetCorp Innovations. Destination, offshore account, Marber CR 22847. Authorization. Key, E. Crane, IPERS XX 01. David stared at the screen, his world tilting on its axis. "Elliot," he whispered. Elliot Crane, his chief operating officer, his friend for 15 years. The man who'd stood beside him at MarkTech's founding, who'd celebrated every victory, who'd been at his wedding, who'd— "No," David shook his head violently. "There has to be a mistake. Elliot would never—" "The authorization key doesn't lie," Mary said, her voice gentle but firm. "And neither does $30 million from your biggest competitor." David's legs gave out. He sank into a chair, his hands trembling. "He was there from the beginning," David said, his voice breaking. "We built this together. How could he? Why would he?" Mary placed a hand on his shoulder. Because someone offered him something he wanted more than loyalty. She pulled up another file, encrypted communications between Crane's personal server and NetCorp executives. Dates, times, transaction records. A conspiracy months in the making. He didn't just want to steal from you, David, Mary said quietly. He wanted to destroy you, and then rebuild MarkTech under NetCorp's banner, with himself at the helm. David looked up at her, his eyes hollow with betrayal. What do we do now? Mary's expression hardened. Now? We set a trap of our own. They waited until 11:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. The executive floor was empty except for the three of them, David, Mary, and Elliot Crane, who had been summoned under the pretense of an urgent quantum link security review. Elliot walked into David's office with his usual confidence, tablet in hand, $1,000 suit perfectly pressed. He stopped when he saw Mary standing beside David's desk. "David, why is maintenance here?" Elliot asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Sit down, Elliot," David said, his voice flat. "Look, if this is about overtime budgets—" $30 million, David interrupted. NetCorp Innovations, offshore account CR2847, your authorization key. The color drained from Elliot's face. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had lost its steadiness. Mary stepped forward, pulling up a holographic display from David's desk interface. Financial records, encrypted communications, transaction timestamps. The entire conspiracy laid bare in glowing blue light. "March 14th, Mary said calmly. "You met with NetCorp's CEO in Vancouver. April 2nd, you planted the back door using stolen military-grade malware. June 18th, first payment, $5 million. September 23rd, the main transfer, $30 million, wired 6 hours before you triggered the attack that nearly destroyed this company." Elliot's composure shattered like glass. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "Do you know what it's like? Standing in your shadow for 15 years? David's brilliant. David's the genius. I built this company with you, and the world acts like I was just along for the ride." "So you sold me out?" David's voice cracked. "You tried to destroy everything we built together?" "We didn't build anything," Elliot shouted. "You built it, and I was supposed to be grateful for scraps while you became a god." His hand shot toward his briefcase. Mary moved instantly, but Elliot was faster. He grabbed an encrypted drive from his jacket and lunged for the nearest terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. Data began transferring, the last pieces of evidence, the backup files he'd hidden. "No!" David rushed forward. Elliot spun, shoving him hard. David crashed into his desk, monitors tumbling. Mary was already at the main console, her fingers dancing across the interface. "Lockdown protocol, now!" she commanded. Every door in the building sealed with a heavy thunk. Network access severed. Elliot's transfer stopped at 67%. "You can't do this!" Elliot screamed, yanking the drive free. He ran for the private elevator. Mary tackled him from behind. They hit the floor hard. Elliot was larger, stronger, but Mary fought with the precision of someone trained for combat. She twisted his arm, forcing him to drop the drive. He threw an elbow that caught her cheek, snapping her head back. David recovered, grabbing Elliot from behind. They struggled, 3 bodies locked in desperate combat, furniture overturning, glass shattering. Elliot broke free, scrambling for the drive. His fingers closed around it just as Mary's foot came down on his wrist. He howled in pain. "It's over, Elliot," she said quietly. The elevator chimed. Security flooded the office. 6 officers who'd been stationed 2 floors down, waiting for Mary's signal. They hauled Elliot to his feet, restraining him as he screamed threats and justifications. David stood frozen, watching his friend, his brother in everything but blood, being dragged away in handcuffs. The office fell silent. Mary retrieved the encrypted drive, her lip bleeding, her uniform torn. She set it on David's desk without a word, then turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" David asked. "My shift ends at midnight," she said simply. "The floors won't clean themselves." "Mary, wait!" She kept walking. David caught her arm gently. "You're not going anywhere. Not again." She turned, her eyes questioning. "Without you, I'd have lost everything tonight," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "My company, my reputation, maybe even my life. You didn't just save Mark Tech, you saved me." "I did what needed to be done," Mary said. "That's all?" "No," David shook his head. "You did what no one else could have done, what no one else even saw needed doing." He paused. "I'm not asking you to clean floors anymore, Mary. I'm asking you to help me rebuild what Elliot tried to destroy. From the inside. As someone who actually belongs at the table." Mary studied him for a long moment, searching his face for sincerity. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "Then let me change that," David said. "Starting now." For the first time since he'd met her, Mary Evans smiled. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's rebuild." 3 days later, David Mark stood before a sea of reporters, cameras, and flashing lights in Mark Tech's main auditorium. The tech world had gathered to hear his statement about the crisis that had nearly destroyed Silicon Valley's rising giant. Mary stood backstage, still wearing her maintenance uniform, insisting she didn't belong in the spotlight. David cleared his throat, gripping the podium. 3 weeks ago, Mark Tech Global was sabotaged from within, he began. Our COO, a man I called friend, sold us out to our competitors for $30 million. He planted malware designed to erase everything we'd built, and he almost succeeded. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But he didn't succeed, because of one person, a woman who saw what my entire executive team missed, a woman who stopped a catastrophic cyber attack in under 60 seconds, using skills most of us didn't know existed. He paused. "Mary Evans, would you please join me?" Mary hesitated, then stepped into the lights. Cameras exploded with clicks and flashes. "This woman," David continued, his voice thick with emotion, "was a decorated cyber defense analyst for the U.S. military before she was wrongfully disgraced and erased from the system. For 5 years, she's been cleaning the floors of the building she once would have protected. And when my empire was burning, she's the one who saved it." He turned to face her directly. "Effective immediately, Mary Evans is Mark Tech Global's Chief Security Officer, the first woman and the first black woman to hold this position in any top-tier Silicon Valley firm." The auditorium erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes turned the room into lightning. Mary's eyes glistened, but she stood tall, nodding once, accepting not just the position, but the restoration of everything that had been stolen from her. By morning, headlines blazed across every outlet: "The cleaning lady who saved Silicon Valley." Within a week, the U.S. military launched a formal review of Mary's case. David personally testified, providing evidence that cleared her name completely. Her record was restored. Her security clearance reinstated. An official apology issued. But the real change happened quietly. 6 weeks later, David led Mary through MarkTech's newly renovated innovation lab, a sprawling space of glass, steel, and humming servers. He stopped before a wall where a bronze plaque had been mounted, gleaming under soft lights. The Evans Cyber Defense Center. Because every empire needs a guardian. Mary's breath caught. She reached out, fingers trembling as they traced the engraved letters of her name. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "Yes, I did," David said. "You gave me back my company, but more than that, you gave me back something I'd lost years ago: perspective, humility. The understanding that leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about seeing the people in the room at all." He turned to face her. "How can I ever repay you, Mary?" She smiled, that same gentle smile that had calmed him in his darkest hour. "See the people you overlook, David," she said softly. "The janitors, the assistants, the security guards. The people who make your empire possible, while you're too busy building it to notice them. That's how you change the world. That's how you repay me." David nodded, understanding settling deep in his chest, like an anchor finally finding ground. "I promise," he said. "I won't forget again." Mary extended her hand. He shook it, not as boss and employee, not as savior and saved, but as equals. Partners. Two people who'd rebuilt each other when the world had tried to break them both. Sometimes the person who saves you doesn't wear a suit or carry a title. Sometimes your miracle doesn't arrive in a limousine with a business card and credentials. Sometimes they show up at midnight, pushing a cleaning cart, wearing a uniform the world trained you not to see. David Mark learned that the hard way. He learned that genius isn't measured by IQ or net worth, but by heart. He learned that the most powerful people in any building aren't always sitting in corner offices. Sometimes they're mopping floors, answering phones, or holding doors open. And he learned that when you finally open your eyes to see the invisible people around you, you don't just change their world, you change yours. Because in the end, we're all just one crisis away from realizing that our empires mean nothing without the guardians we never knew were there. Sometimes your miracle wears a uniform, carries a mop, and knows exactly how to reboot the world. You just have to be humble enough to let them. Thank you for watching. To the end, if this story changed how you see the people around you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below where you're watching from and tell us who's the unsung hero in your life. Let's celebrate them together.